let me do the judging criteria, because this is something else that's different with one as well. So obviously in most organizations, they'll use the 10-point must system. It's under the unified rules, where each round is judged on a basis of 10 points or less for each fighter in there. So usually if one fighter wins the round, fairly clearly, then they'll get 10 points and their opponent will get 9. If it was a dominant round, or there was a big knockdown or a near finish, it would be a 10-8 round. And these scores are accumulated over 3 or 5 rounds to then determine who's the winner at the end. The difference with one championship is that they score the fight as a whole. So there's no division over the rounds. If you can have a really terrible first round and a pretty rough second round, but then have a fantastic third round, and that could win you the fight. Or you could have a real good first round, and then have a very steady rest of the fight where neither fighter takes hold, and you could have done enough in the first round to get the judges' scorecards. So it's not divided up. As soon as the first 5 minutes is up, it's not okay, that's sectioned off and you're judged on that piece alone, and then we move into the second round and start fresh. It rolls on, so it's judged as a fight in general. So the accumulation of work over the fight is something that fighters can really, really benefit from. There have been a couple of fights recently. There was a fight between Rayun Ok and Marat Gafarov, and that was a fight that I could have seen definitely under the old unified rules that may have been judged differently based on the wrestling and back taking of Gafarov. But the accumulation of work and the intention to finish from Ok was what won him the decision in that fight. And I think it's an interesting conversation to have between the two judging criterias. I don't think one's better than the other. I actually quite like the idea of the fight just being judged as a whole. But that's it's a conversation to have. I think it's interesting that people are trying different things, certainly. And it does more lean into the idea of it is one thing as opposed to broken down into sections. I think the scoring over individual rounds much more leans towards a sporting context, whereas the scoring the fight as a whole is much more about the success of martial arts. But I mean, that's just a general and very, very basic opinion of mine. I'm sure I can get into that at some point in the future. The judging criteria, although it's worded differently, and I'll read this directly off the One Championship website, although the wording is slightly different, it does speak to the same terms as the unified rules. So decision wins. In the event that a bout goes the distance, it will go to a judge's decision. The 3 judges will score the bout in its entirety, not round by round. Judges will utilize the one judging criteria in descending order of importance to determine the winner of the bout. So the important thing to remember in that part is the in descending order. Same as the unified rules, they are listed out by priority. So the one judging criteria, near KO or submission, is the most important. Damage, internal, accumulated, or superficial, I suppose. Striking combinations and cage generalship, which includes ground control and superior positioning, and then earned takedowns or takedown defense, and then aggression is last. So my initial thoughts on this, near KO or submission, damage, and striking combinations, that all for me falls under effective striking and grappling. You've got cage generalship in there. That is cage control. So being able to manage the range and the distance or the speed of the fight, whether you're controlling it with footwork from the center or whether you're controlling it from top position or from the back. These are all things that are going to lean into the judges and their scoring criteria. But the priority is always the near knockouts, the big impactful shots, and the attempts at submissions that come close. So the intention is always to score the finish. And to be honest, the judging criteria is very similar in a lot of ways to the new criteria, where the onus is on finishing the fight as opposed to controlling the fight. Again, it's the way to go. The difference here, earned takedowns. So earned takedowns, I feel, are when someone intends to get a takedown and they work for it and they get it. It could be as simple as that. Obviously, in transitions, in scuffles, there are people, people get tangled up and fall to the floor, or those kind of scenarios. They also mention takedown defense, which, to my knowledge, and I will double check this, but to my knowledge, is not a priority on the scoring criteria of the unified rules. As Mark Goddard puts it so eloquently, defense is its own reward. So I think it's interesting that takedown defense is listed there. And I'm neither for nor against it. I do agree with Mark Goddard that defense is its own reward. But then, if takedown defense is being used to maintain the fight in your range, like say if you're a striker and you want to keep the fight standing, takedown defense is your showing your ability to control the range of the fight. So, I mean, for me, it would probably fall under the superior positioning and cage generalship section of the scoring, and then aggression being being the last criteria. Obviously, you have to intend to win the fight. So that is, that's up there, because if all of these other things are even, then you strip it right back to, well, who was the most aggressive? So if they both had a near knockout or a near submission, they've both been beat to hell, and and they're both pretty damaged. They've both got beautiful striking combinations, and they've been managing the cage about 50-50, and neither of them have earned nor defended takedowns very well. Then you've got aggression to fall back on. It's, you can see how the scoring criteria is worked through for the judges. The only difference, as I said, is that scoring criteria is not applied to one round and then that score's put to bed and we go, okay, round two, let me judge this from a whole new perspective. That's the main difference, which, again, like I said, I think is an interesting way of approaching it. Ultimately, I think we get the same results, though. I don't think it affects the fights in a great deal. I think, if anything, and I've had a conversation with a couple of my good judge friends, and they've given me very interesting perspectives on this and on their opinions of it and how it differs to the unified rules, which is what they're more familiar with. And I think, there are pros and cons to both. We'll get a podcast together at some point and we'll discuss it, because they're both fascinating individuals. And I think, we have to realize as well that MMA is a young sport. We're talking 30, 35 years at the most, and we're still trying to figure things out, and things do have to shift and change. And the attempts to fix the weight cutting problem, I think, is a big step forward for one. And also the way that things are scored and judged, it leads for exciting fights. It encourages people to push for a finish and be decisive. And I think that should always be the focus of mixed martial arts.